Hey everyone! This is a quick reminder to subscribe and hit that like button. It lets me know that you are enjoying my content. Also, feel free to drop your suggestions for future stories in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and let's dive right in. There's a strange peace that settles into your bones when you've been driving for too long. It's not quite exhaustion, not quite calm, somewhere in that weird limbo where your thoughts start to blur with the scenery, and the road feels less like a place and more like a state of mind. That's where I was when I first saw the sign. Welcome to Red Pines. It looked like it had been there forever. Wooden, sun-bleached, the red paint cracked and curling like dried blood around the edges. It stood alone off the side of the highway, tilted slightly, like it had been watching the road for years and had finally gotten tired. I should have kept driving. Instead, I flicked on my blinker and pulled off the highway without thinking twice. My music played low, windows down, warm air crawling across my arm as I turned onto a dusty two-lane road that disappeared into a line of trees. Honestly, I wasn't even headed anywhere specific. My solo road trip from New York to San Francisco had been a last-minute, post-finals, probably bad decision kind of thing. I'd finished my exams, walked out of my apartment in a daze, and crammed the essentials into my tiny hatchback like someone fleeing the apocalypse. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. Just drove. No plan. No GPS beyond whatever my phone was willing to cough up. No real destination, just a vague promise to myself that I'd end up at the coast, eventually. The idea had been freedom, some kind of romantic, find-myself cross-country journey, one dusty gas station at a time. I didn't plan much, barely checked the routes. I figured, what's the worst that could happen? Get lost? End up somewhere weird? Please. I'd already lived in New York for 4 years. Weird didn't scare me. In small towns, they got a bad rap in horror movies, sure, but in real life, they were just quiet places where people had too many cats and too much time. I kind of liked them. They had this strange, gentle charm, a sense of stillness that big cities would murder you for. In a city, you could bleed out on a sidewalk and no one would even pause their podcast. In a town like this, somebody would at least ask if you were okay first. So yeah, when I saw that old sign for Red Pines, I didn't hesitate. I rolled down the windows a little farther, turned the music up just enough to keep my thoughts company, and drove in with the kind of naive confidence that only really kicks in when you're too tired to be nervous. About 3 miles before the actual town, I spotted a gas station sitting crooked on the edge of the road. The kind of place that looked like it had outlived several owners, a recession, and possibly the concept of time itself. The pumps were old, like really old. The numbers were faded to the point that I couldn't tell if I was being charged $3.89 or $38 a gallon. The open sign in the window looked hand-painted, and judging by how sun-warped the letters were, I didn't think it had been flipped in years. Still, my tank was low, so I pulled in. The pump wheezed as I filled up, the hose coughing like a smoker on his last legs. The air smelled like sun-baked pavement and dust. Once I was topped off, I headed inside for snacks, chips, a Gatorade, and something sugary to keep me from getting hangry later. Inside, it was quiet. Still, the kind of quiet that feels unnatural, like the whole building had been holding its breath until I walked in. The only person there was the cashier. Middle-aged, heavy-set, wearing a red flannel shirt that made no sense in the desert heat. He stood behind the counter like he'd been carved from the same wood as it, watching me with that kind of small-town stare that was friendly and suspicious at the same time. He gave me the once-over as I dropped my stuff on the counter. "You headed somewhere?" he asked. I smiled, trying to seem chill. "Yeah, saw the sign for Red Pines. Thought I'd check it out." That's when something shifted in his face. Not a lot. Just a flicker. A flash in the eyes. Like I'd said something I wasn't supposed to. "That town's weird," he muttered, his voice slower now, like the words had weight. He started ringing me up, but each beep felt a beat too long. "The people are weird there." I blinked. "Weird how?" He didn't answer right away, just shook his head a little. Then he leaned in, just enough to make my skin crawl. "Just be careful," he said, voice low. "And whatever you do, don't tell anyone your name while you're there." I stared at him, waiting for the joke, the smirk, the laugh. Nothing. His face didn't twitch, his eyes didn't break contact. He just stared, heavy with something I couldn't name. I gave a half laugh, the kind you give when someone says something weird and you want to keep the peace. Okay, thanks. I paid, mumbled a goodbye, and walked back out into the sun. As I climbed into my car, the bag of snacks crinkling in the seat next to me, I could still feel his eyes on my back. I started the engine and pulled back onto the road, trying to shake off the weirdness like dust. But his voice followed me. Don't tell anyone your name. It echoed in my head, sharper with every mile. What kind of town needs a rule like that? Red Pines didn't look like much. Honestly, it barely looked like a town at all. Just one lonely main street sitting under a sky that stretched out like it had something to prove. No traffic lights, no people on the sidewalks, just a handful of squat buildings squinting in the late afternoon sun. I rolled slowly down the main drag, trying to get a feel for the place. There was a diner, a little motel with a half-lit sign, a grocery store with only a few of its neon letters still clinging to life, and something else, a small, strange building that might have been a museum, or a gift shop, or someone's garage that had been filled with rocks and declared historic. Hard to say. If I had to describe the vibe, it felt like that town from Cars. Radiator Springs. Except, this version had been left in the sun too long and forgotten how to smile. Everything about it looked preserved, but not in a cute way. In the way a taxidermied animal might look if you left it on the porch too long. I parked in front of the motel. The sign above the door read, Pines Rest, though the R in rest was flickering like it couldn't decide whether to stay lit or give up entirely. There were no cars in the lot except mine. I grabbed my backpack, slung it over one shoulder, and stepped into the lobby. The door creaked open with the enthusiasm of a dying breath. Inside, it was dim and smelled faintly of old air freshener and something synthetic, like a motel trying a little too hard to pretend it didn't have a past. The lobby was small. Wood paneling on every surface, a few fake plants gathering plastic dust, and a stack of ancient tourism pamphlets no one had touched in at least a decade. Behind the counter sat a girl around my age, scrolling through her phone. She looked up as I entered and gave me a bright, warm smile. Too bright. Too warm. Hi there, she said, her voice chipper and practiced. Can I help you? I returned the smile, trying not to show how much my skin had just tried to climb off my body. Room for the night, please? She tilted her head like a curious dog, still smiling, still watching. Do you have an ID? That caught me. What? Your ID, she repeated, voice soft, sweet, and unwavering. We need to know who's staying the night, for emergencies and stuff. That's when something started to tickle at the back of my skull. A dull, crawling sensation like memory waking up. The gas station guy. Don't tell anyone your name while you're there. My hand froze halfway to my wallet. Was this it? Was this what he meant? Because technically I wouldn't be telling her anything. I'd just be handing her a card, letting her read it. That was different, right? I stood there blinking, trying to think through the fog that had started to settle in my brain like smoke. Something in my gut told me to lie, to make up a name, to say I didn't have an ID, but my fingers were already moving, and I didn't want to look crazy. Not yet. So I handed it over. She took it without hesitation. Her smile widened as she looked it over. Widened too far. Just for a second. A split second. Right as her lips pulled across her teeth, I saw it. A tear. A thin, hairline crack at the corner of her mouth. Red. Not lipstick. Blood. Just a line. Just a glimmer. And then it was gone. She looked back down at the card like nothing had happened. Kylie, right? She said, reading it aloud. And in that moment, something dropped in my chest like a stone into a still lake. Because the gas station guy hadn't said don't show your name. He'd said don't tell, and I had just nodded. That's what got me, that small, stupid instinct to confirm, that tiny nod. The wordless yes that slipped out of me like a reflex. Was that enough? Did it count? I didn't know, but I felt it. That invisible thread snapping inside me. Okay, Kylie, she said, her voice as sweet and harmless as sugar on glass. You're in 112. If you need anything, I'll be here all night. She slid the key across the counter. Her nails were perfectly filed. Her hand didn't shake. I took the key like it might bite me, and I smiled like everything was fine, even though something inside me was screaming now. Loud. I walked to the room without looking back. My backpack felt heavier than it should have. Like it knew something I didn't. The motel hallway smelled like dust and air freshener, the kind of smell that clings to your hair and your memories. Room 112 was at the far end. I slid the key in and opened the door. It looked like every motel room I'd ever stayed in. Beige walls, heavy curtains, cheap framed artwork, a bed with a scratchy brown comforter, and a bolted-down nightstand. The kind of place designed to be forgettable. But I wouldn't forget this one. I knew that already. I didn't even sit down. The moment the door clicked shut behind me, my stomach made a noise so loud it practically echoed. A deep, hollow groan like something had curled up in there and was now gnawing its way out. I pressed a hand against my belly as if that would help, but it only made the ache more real. I hadn't eaten since, God, I didn't even remember. The half bag of trail mix I'd inhaled in Kansas? The cold gas station sandwich in Colorado? Either way, my blood sugar was throwing a tantrum, and the unease slithering through my chest didn't stand a chance against hunger. I dropped my bag on the end of the bed, glanced around the room once, then turned right back around and headed out. The night air hit me in the face, dry, cool, and full of dust. Somewhere off in the distance, I could hear the low hum of insects, or maybe some kind of machinery humming through the town like a second heartbeat. The street was nearly silent otherwise, lit by a few flickering overhead lamps that painted everything in a sickly orange glow. I walked back toward the front desk, trying not to look like I was in a hurry, trying not to think about the girl's smile or the way her lip had cracked like overripe fruit. Sarah looked up from her phone the second I stepped in, her face lighting up like I was an old friend returning from war. "Hey again," she chirped, setting the phone down like she hadn't been waiting for me this whole time. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just hungry," I said. "Is the diner any good?" Her eyes sparkled. "Best in town," she said with a straight face, then broke into a giggle. "As in, it's the only one." She laughed like she'd just landed the punchline of the year, like no one had ever thought to say that before. I forced a laugh back, mostly so I didn't seem rude. I stepped back out onto the porch, the door clicking softly behind me, and looked across the street. The diner was waiting. It sat there glowing in the dark, like it had been plucked out of a 1950s postcard and stuck here for no good reason. Chrome trim, pink and blue neon sign that buzzed every few seconds, a big front window showcasing the booths inside. Even from across the road, I could see the red leather seats and the black and white checkered floor. A few silhouettes moved inside. Slow, relaxed, like they didn't have anywhere else to be. Something about it felt wrong, like the scene had been staged too carefully, like the people were props, and I was about to walk onto a set I hadn't auditioned for. Still, hunger pushed me forward. I crossed the street. The neon sign above the door flickered just as I reached it, buzzing louder for a moment before settling back into a steady glow. I pulled the handle and stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Grease, salt, fryer oil that had been working overtime for decades. It should have made me feel at ease, familiar, comforting. It didn't. Instead, it clung to the back of my throat, heavy and artificial, like someone had bottled the idea of food rather than the real thing. The music came next, soft country from an ancient speaker tucked into a dusty corner, warbling just a hair off key. It was the kind of music you didn't really hear until you noticed it was the only thing breaking the silence. A handful of people sat scattered across the diner. Two older couples in opposite booths, a few teens hunched around a milkshake, and a man alone at the counter pretending to read a newspaper that was too crisp to be believable. All of them looked up. All of them. I froze mid-step as every single pair of eyes in the room locked onto me. Not aggressively. Not even rudely. Just watching. Like I was the next act in a play they'd seen 1,000 times, but still couldn't wait to see unfold. Before I could turn around, a woman behind the counter smiled at me and waved me over. "You must be Kylie, right?" I blinked. "What?" "Oh, Sarah told me," she said, already reaching for a menu. "She works the motel. We don't get a lot of new faces in Red Pines, so..." She trailed off with a shrug, like it was the most normal thing in the world for someone to walk in and have their name already waiting. "I'm sorry, dear. What can I get for you?" I hesitated. Every cell in my body screamed leave, but my stomach growled again, loud enough for her to hear. What do you recommend?" "Classic burger. Fries. You won't regret it." I nodded once, gave a tight-lipped smile, and mumbled, "Sure." She scribbled something down, handed me a menu I didn't need, and gestured toward the booths. I walked slowly to the back corner, choosing the farthest seat from the window, the kitchen, and everyone else. I sat down, hands folded tightly in my lap. I could still feel them. The eyes. Even though most of them had turned back to their food or fake conversations, I could feel the weight of their gazes, the way their heads didn't move naturally, the way their forks lifted just a little too slow. They were still watching, just trying to pretend they weren't. A few minutes later, the burger arrived. Fries on the side, glistening under a sheen of oil that looked like it had seen too many lifetimes. I picked it up slowly, took a bite, chewed, and stopped. It was soft, too soft. Not just undercooked soft, the juicy pink center kind of soft. No, this was something else, something wrong. The kind of texture that made your teeth hesitate, that made your tongue recoil before your brain could even figure out why. I forced another chew, trying to tell myself I was overthinking. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe everything about this town was messing with my head. And then, crunch. I bit down on something hard, small, solid, cold against my molars. The pain was sharp, immediate. I pulled the bite from my mouth with trembling fingers, coughing as I spat into my napkin. And there it was, nestled in the half-chewed mess of meat and bread and ketchup. A finger. Not a chicken finger. Not a plastic prank, a human one. Pale, small, nail-painted a chipped peachy pink. The kind of detail that sticks in your brain forever. I stared at it, and then I screamed. The kind of scream that rips up from your chest like it's trying to claw its way out of your throat. Every head in the diner turned, again, but when I looked back down, it was gone. The burger had hit the floor, splattered across the tiles. No finger, no blood, just meat, bread, ketchup. My breath caught. My heart was a war drum. The woman from the counter rushed over, eyes wide. "What's wrong, dear?" I looked at her. Looked down, looked around. Nothing, just crumbs and ketchup. "I think I'm not hungry anymore." I stood, legs shaking. My body felt light, like I might float off the floor and disappear. I fumbled a few bills from my pocket, didn't wait for change, and left without another word. Outside, the air felt even heavier than before, and I was still starving, still shaking, and still tasting something in my mouth that didn't belong to me. I didn't go back to the motel right away. I couldn't. Not with the taste still stuck in my mouth. Not with my heartbeat still rattling around in my chest like a dropped drumstick. Not with that image still burned behind my eyes. The finger, peach pink nail, chipped just enough to make it real. Too real. Even if it was gone now. Even if everyone inside the diner acted like it had never been there at all. I stood outside the diner for a second, frozen in place under the flickering street lamp, clutching the edge of my jacket like it might keep the weird out. My body was buzzing, electric. The kind of buzz that says, something is not okay. My stomach twisted again. Still hungry. Still empty. Still begging for something, anything, that didn't come with a side of psychological collapse. So I crossed the street. The grocery store was squat and tired-looking, with one of those glowing signs that probably used to say something cheerful like Red Pines Market, but now just buzzed out a few disjointed letters like a half-remembered dream. One of the letters sparked as I passed under it, a tiny pop that made me flinch. Inside, the air was too cold. Artificial. The kind of cold that didn't come from clean refrigeration, but from overworked units and underused spaces. It smelled faintly like floor wax, aging plastic, and the kind of fruit that gets stocked more out of obligation than expectation. The place was nearly empty. Just shelves standing in neat little rows and one guy behind the register who didn't look up when I came in. I moved quickly, scanning the aisles, grabbing things that felt safe. Pre-packaged, factory sealed, chips, a granola bar, something sweet. I didn't care. As long as it didn't bleed. The checkout lane was just as quiet. The fluorescent lights above buzzed steadily, whispering secrets I couldn't quite hear. I stepped up to the counter and reached into my pocket. "You need coins?" I asked, trying to sound casual, normal, like I hadn't just hallucinated a body part in my dinner. Without looking up, the man behind the counter said, "Yeah, Kylie, that'd be great." My hand froze mid-motion. I stared at him. How do you know my name?" He finally looked up, and the second I saw his face, I knew something was very, very wrong. It was familiar. Too familiar. like someone had taken the same face I'd already seen and copied it onto a new person. The same tired flannel, the same neutral expression, but blurred around the edges somehow. Off by just enough to feel counterfeit. His eyes didn't move like eyes should. His smile didn't bloom, it just appeared. Wide, wrong, cracked, just like Sarah's. That same too wide grin with just the barest glimmer of something red at the corners. "At this point," he said, still smiling, "everyone knows. I didn't say a word, didn't ask for my change, didn't wait. I grabbed the bag and walked out, fast, shoulders tight, hands shaking, almost ran. Back into the night air, back toward the motel, the only place I had left to go, even if I didn't want to. The silence had changed. The quiet wasn't still anymore, it was charged. Electric, like something under the surface of the town was watching now. Awake. I reached the motel room with keys clenched so tightly in my fist, I left little half-moon indents in my palm, slammed the door behind me, locked it, then double-checked the lock, as if it would do anything. I stood in the middle of the room, holding the plastic grocery bag like it might protect me. My skin buzzed. My heart was loud enough to hear in my ears. What the hell was this place? What had I walked into? I thought about leaving. Right then. Just grabbing my stuff, hopping in the car, and driving until the tank ran dry. But the desert was dark. The road was empty, and the gas station had been miles back. I told myself I'd stay the night, just until morning. A few hours of sleep. Then I'd be out. I'd be gone before the sun had time to lift the shadows off this place. I kicked off my shoes and stepped into the bathroom. Stripped down, turned on the water, let the steam rise before stepping in, hoping the heat would burn the wrong off my skin. For a moment, it worked. The water hit my shoulders, ran down my spine, and I started to breathe again. Deep, shaky breaths that didn't quite reach my stomach. I closed my eyes, leaned into the warmth, let my thoughts melt. Then I opened my eyes. And everything was red. Blood. It poured from the shower head in thick, syrupy streams. Dark, too dark. It ran over my arms, my chest, my legs, down the tile, into the drain. It coated the walls, the floor, the air filled with the sharp, metallic stink of rust and rot and something that didn't belong. I couldn't breathe. I screamed, stumbled back, slipped on the wet tile, crashed into the wall. Pain shot through my hip, but I didn't stop. I crawled out of the shower, dragging a towel off the rack, wrapping it around myself with shaking hands. I turned back, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear, and saw clear water dripping from the faucet. Nothing red, just steam curling gently in the air. My breathing was ragged. I sat there on the bathroom floor, drenched and shivering, towel clutched to my chest, trying to convince myself I was still sane. Then the knock came. "Kylie?" Her voice. Sarah, muffled through the door but still too close. "Are you okay?" No, absolutely not. I stood, yanked on my clothes with wet skin, every movement rushed and clumsy. "I'm fine," I shouted back, too loud, too high, my voice cracked halfway through the sentence. I grabbed my backpack, the grocery bag, my keys. Every muscle in my body was screaming now. No more warnings, no more hesitation. I was done. By the time I reached the front desk, my hands were shaking and my brain felt like it had been scrubbed with steel wool. Sarah looked up slowly, and she wasn't smiling anymore. Or she was, but only halfway. And something in her face had shifted, like the part that pretended to be human had slipped just enough to reveal the thing underneath. "Emergency back home," I mumbled, avoiding her eyes. "I have to leave." "Kylie, please," she said. Her voice was different now, softer, too soft. I stopped, one foot already pointed toward the exit. She stood behind the desk, fingers gripping the edge so tightly her knuckles went white. "Don't go," she whispered. "Please. I didn't mean to scare you. It's just, this place, it needs people like you, people who wander in." I stared at her, heart thudding. "Like me?" She nodded, eyes dropping to the countertop. "We don't get many," she said quietly. "And once they know your name, it's harder to leave. But I liked you, I really did. You were kind." She looked up again, and the smile was back. Too wide, lips torn at the corners, blood weeping from the cracks. "See you soon, Kylie." I didn't say goodbye, didn't look back. I stepped out the door, got in the car, and peeled out of that place, like the road might vanish behind me if I didn't move fast enough. I didn't slow down. Not when I hit the highway. Not when the rearview mirror showed the last dusty rooftops of red pines vanishing into the dark. Not when the night swallowed the edges of the road and turned everything into shadows and headlights. I just drove. Hands locked on the wheel, eyes wide and stinging. Mind a thunderstorm of static. My heart hadn't settled. My chest still felt cracked open, like it hadn't remembered how to hold anything in since the diner. Since the shower? Since Sarah's voice behind that door. I was too scared to cry, too wired to scream. All I could do was run. The desert was empty. The road stretched endlessly in both directions, carved between hills that looked like skeletons in the moonlight. My headlights flicked across dry brush and jagged fence posts. No cars, no signs, just asphalt and silence and the hum of the engine that felt like the only thing tethering me to reality. I told myself I'd drive until I hit another town, or a real gas station, or just some sign of normalcy. I didn't care how far. I didn't care how late. Just away. I don't know how long I'd been driving when I saw him. A figure ahead, lit briefly by my high beams, standing off the shoulder with a thumb out and a backpack slung over one arm. A hitchhiker. Every cell in my body screamed no. I didn't care. I slowed down anyway. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was habit. Maybe I just didn't want to feel alone for one more mile. Either way, I rolled to a stop beside him, reached across, and pushed the door open. He climbed in without a word. Boots scuffed with dust, hoodie pulled over his head, face shadowed and tired. He settled into the seat like someone who'd done this too many times already. He didn't look at me, just stared straight ahead. I pulled back onto the road. We drove in silence for a long time. The only sound was the tires on asphalt and the faint rattle of something loose in the dashboard. The air between us was thick, heavy, like the car had become its own little bubble of tension floating through a dead world. Finally I asked, "Where are you coming from?" He didn't answer at first, just stared out the windshield. Then, "Red Pines." My hands tightened on the wheel. "Me too." He nodded slowly. "They knew my name," he said. "Everyone. I never told a soul." My throat was dry. I swallowed hard. "Same." He glanced out the window, eyes tracking something I couldn't see. "I got a drink at the bar. Some guy sitting next to me started talking. Asked how my hiking trip was going. Said my name like we were old friends." He paused. I figured maybe someone from the gas station told him. You know, small town stuff. He shifted in the seat. His fingers rubbed absently at the hem of his sleeve. But then it got weirder. He said it like it hadn't been weird already. I went back to my room, that same motel. I think it's the only one. Woke up in the middle of the night. He turned to look at me now. Just slightly. There was someone standing over me. Not moving, not talking. Just staring, smiling. My stomach dropped. My fingers flexed on the steering wheel. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. It felt like my body wasn't mine. I wanted to ask what happened next, but my mouth wouldn't work. So he kept talking. They whispered it in my ear. Whispered what? He looked at me. My name, over and over, like they were trying to pull it out of me. He pulled up his sleeve then, just enough to show his forearm. I almost swerved. Etched into the skin, scarred in deep red lines, was a single word. Andrew. "I didn't do this," he said. His voice didn't shake. It just showed up. We didn't speak after that. The car kept moving. The desert stretched on. The world outside the windshield felt less and less real with every passing mile. Eventually, the sun began to rise, soft and pale and empty. He pointed at a trailhead off the side of the road. "This is me." He opened the door, slung his bag over his shoulder. "Thanks for the ride." I nodded. "Be safe." He paused, smiled. "You too, Kylie." My heart stopped. I never told him my name. I watched him walk off down the trail without another word, disappearing into the dust like he'd never been there at all. I kept driving. Faster now. Not looking back. My brain felt like it was fraying at the edges. I just needed to get out. Past the edge of the weird. Past wherever the hell this loop had started. And that's when I saw it. A building. Low. Rusted. Familiar. The gas station. Same pumps. Same sign. Same crooked open still swaying in the breeze. I stared at it as I pulled in, my hands trembling on the wheel. No, this couldn't be the same one, could it? Maybe it was just a similar layout. Maybe Utah just had a theme. But the second I stepped out of the car, I knew. It was the same gas station. I filled the tank with shaky hands, barely able to keep the nozzle in place. My thoughts were static, my chest was tight, my vision blurred at the edges like the world was starting to reject me. I went inside, praying to see a different face. Nope, The man behind the counter looked up like he'd been expecting me. Same flannel, same tired eyes, same sadness. Not surprise, not confusion, just inevitability. "You told them your name," he said softly. I froze in place. No, I didn't. I stammered. "Sarah asked for my ID, I didn't say." "You nodded, didn't you?" His voice was like a blade now. "You nodded when she said it, that's enough." My legs nearly gave out. He looked at me with something close to pity. "Look, I'm sorry, Kylie, but you're not leaving this town." And when he said my name, I felt it. Not in the air, not in the room, but inside me, like the word didn't belong to me anymore, like it had been taken, branded. I didn't wait. I turned and ran, out the door. Past the pumps, left everything behind. I jumped into the car, slammed it into gear, and peeled out of that lot like hell itself was on my bumper. I didn't care where I went, I just drove. Faster. Trees blurred past, the road unspooled, the sky got brighter. I didn't stop, I didn't breathe, until I saw it. A sign, familiar, faded, peeling red paint, "Welcome to Red Pines." I slammed the brakes so hard the tires shrieked. I sat there, gripping the wheel, chest heaving. Because it wasn't just the same town, it was the same road, the same gas station behind me, the same motel just ahead. I was back, like I'd never left. I kept driving through the town this time, no slowing down, and now the people were outside, everywhere. Men in rocking chairs, women with grocery bags, children frozen mid-hopscotch, all standing, all watching, and all of them waving. Smiles stretched wide, too wide, lips split at the corners, teeth gleaming, blood dripping down their chins. I pressed the gas harder, barely steering, barely seeing. I flew through Red Pines like speed could break the rules. And then, just past the edge of town, I saw him again. The hitchhiker. Same clothes, same bag, same calm expression. My mind screamed no. My hands stopped the car anyway. He climbed in, slow, silent, didn't look at me. "I'm sorry, Kylie," he said quietly. I didn't respond. Tears rolled down my face, hot, silent, endless. We drove in silence. The road curved again, the sun climbed higher, and then, there it was, the gas station, and behind it, the sign. It was still peeling. It was still crooked. And the people, they were still there, staring at me and waving, their smiles still bleeding.